The day my entire family gathered in the living room to celebrate selling my grandmother's house, they laughed, toasted each other, and talked about how they had finally closed that chapter. Then my older brother looked straight at me and smirked. "You don't get a cent. Grandma would have wanted the money to stay with the people who actually mattered." I smiled, reached into my purse, pulled out a set of keys, and calmly said, "That's funny, because as of this morning the house belongs to me again." You could hear a pin drop. My mother's face turned white. My uncle nearly dropped his glass. Nobody understood what I meant, and none of them knew the truth I'd spent months hiding. They thought they had erased me from Grandma's legacy forever. They had absolutely no idea that I had secretly bought back the one thing they thought they had taken from me. So tell me honestly. If your own family betrayed you, lied to you, and tried to erase you from your grandmother's memory, would you have done what I did? Or would you have simply walked away? For context, I'm a 32-year-old woman named Emma. Growing up, I was always the quiet one in the family. My older brother Ryan was the golden child, my younger cousin Ashley was everyone's princess, and I somehow became the invisible granddaughter. My parents weren't cruel in obvious ways. They never screamed at me for no reason or threw me out. Instead, they mastered something much worse. They ignored my accomplishments, minimized my feelings, and constantly reminded me that I was too emotional. No matter how hard I worked, someone else always deserved the attention more than I did. The only person who ever made me feel truly loved was my grandmother, Margaret. Grandma wasn't rich. She lived in the same small white house for nearly 50 years. The roof leaked every spring, the wooden porch creaked with every step, and the wallpaper in the hallway hadn't been changed since the 80s. But to me it was the warmest place on earth. Every Saturday after school, she'd bake apple pies while telling me stories about her childhood. She taught me how to garden, sew, cook, and most importantly, how to stand on my own feet. Whenever I cried because my parents dismissed me again, Grandma would hug me and whisper, "Never let anyone decide your worth, sweetheart, not even family." As I got older, I became the one who visited her the most. Ryan rarely showed up unless he needed money. Ashley only came around during holidays because she wanted pictures for social media. My mother constantly claimed she was too busy, and my uncle only appeared whenever something needed to be signed. Meanwhile, I took Grandma to doctor's appointments, grocery stores, and physical therapy. I fixed her fence, cleaned her gutters, and sat beside her during endless hospital visits. None of it felt like a burden, because she had spent my entire childhood making me feel important when nobody else did. A few years before she passed away, she started hinting that she worried about the house after she was gone. She told me she hoped it would stay in the family because every corner of it carried memories of Grandpa. She even laughed one afternoon and said, "Promise me you won't let them turn this place into another ugly investment property." I smiled and promised, believing there would be plenty of time before I had to think about that conversation again. Then everything changed. Grandma's health declined much faster than anyone expected. During her final months, I practically lived at the hospital. My family visited just enough to post heartfelt messages online about cherishing every moment. The second visitors left, they'd disappear again. I remember sitting beside Grandma one evening while she struggled to breathe. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "You were always here." Those were among the last clear words she ever spoke to me. After her funeral, I barely had time to grieve before the arguments started. My uncle insisted the house should be sold immediately because none of us wants the maintenance. Ryan agreed because he wanted to pay off debt. Ashley wanted a luxury vacation. My mother kept saying selling it was the practical choice. When I quietly suggested keeping the house in the family, everyone acted like I had said something ridiculous. Ryan actually laughed. "With what money, Emma? You can't afford to buy everybody out." I couldn't. At least not then. The house officially belonged to multiple heirs, and according to the lawyer, everyone had to agree. I begged them to wait. I asked for 6 months to arrange financing. They refused. Apparently waiting would inconvenience everyone's vacation plans. Then came the real betrayal. I learned through the attorney that Grandma had left me something personal, a handwritten letter. Except I never received it. Weeks later, the lawyer accidentally mentioned asking whether I'd enjoyed reading Grandma's note. My stomach dropped. I told him I'd never seen it. He became visibly uncomfortable and admitted my mother had picked up several personal items on behalf of the family. When I confronted her, she claimed she had misplaced the letter. Misplaced it? The last letter my grandmother ever wrote to me. That was the moment I stopped believing this was just about money. Something else was happening. I quietly started asking questions. The lawyer couldn't reveal everything, but he hinted that Grandma had repeatedly spoken about how grateful she was for everything I'd done. Apparently she'd wanted me to have first opportunity to keep the house if possible. Nobody had mentioned that during the family meetings. Instead, they'd rushed every decision while making me feel guilty for slowing things down. The house was listed within weeks. Watching strangers walk through Grandma's living room during open houses felt like someone tearing pages out of my childhood. I stood outside one afternoon pretending to be another interested buyer just so I could walk through one last time. Every room brought back memories. The kitchen where we baked pies. The hallway where she measured my height every birthday. The tiny garden she'd planted with me when I was 9. I cried the entire drive home. That night I made a decision that sounded completely impossible. If I couldn't stop them from selling it, I'd find a way to buy it back. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my closest friends. Instead, I met privately with a financial advisor. I sold investments I'd been saving for another purpose. I emptied nearly every savings account I'd built over the previous decade. I postponed buying my own home. I picked up freelance consulting work during evenings and weekends. Every dollar mattered. Months passed. The house sold. My family celebrated. They spent their share of the money almost immediately. Ryan bought a sports car he couldn't really afford. Ashley filled social media with pictures from expensive resorts. My uncle invested in a business that failed within months. My mother remodeled her kitchen and proudly told everyone she finally had the dream renovation. Every time someone mentioned Grandma's house, they'd say things like, "It's gone now, time to move on." But I hadn't moved on. Because I was still quietly watching. A few months after the sale, I learned the investor who purchased the property had run into unexpected financial trouble. His larger real estate project collapsed, and he wanted to unload several homes quickly, including Grandma's. I knew this was probably my only chance. I contacted his agent immediately. I never mentioned why I wanted the property. To him, I was simply another qualified buyer. The negotiations took weeks. I lived with constant anxiety, terrified someone else would outbid me before everything was finalized. I signed mountains of paperwork without telling a single family member. Every signature felt surreal. Finally, one rainy Tuesday morning, the realtor handed me the keys. "This house is yours." I sat inside Grandma's empty living room and cried harder than I had at her funeral. Because somehow, I'd brought her home back. It wasn't exactly the same. The furniture was gone. The walls had fresh paint. The garden needed work. But underneath all of that, it was still her house. I spent every weekend restoring it. I found old photographs hidden behind a loose cabinet. I replanted her favorite roses. I repaired the porch instead of replacing it because I loved hearing those familiar creaks beneath my feet. Slowly, the house became home again. I kept everything secret because I knew exactly what my family would do if they found out too early. Then came my mother's birthday dinner. Everyone gathered together. Ryan bragged about his expensive car. Ashley complained about luxury hotels. My uncle blamed the economy for his failed investment. Eventually, someone brought up Grandma's house. Ryan laughed. "Best decision we ever made. Imagine if we'd listened to Emma and kept that old place." Everyone chuckled. Then he looked directly at me. "You were so dramatic over a dump." That was the moment I realized they still believed they had won. So before I tell you what happened next, I want to ask you something. Imagine dedicating years to caring for someone you loved while everyone else ignored them. Imagine being pushed aside, lied to, and cut out by your own family. Then imagine finally having one chance to make things right. What would you have done? Would you have told them immediately? Would you have stayed silent forever? Or would you have waited for exactly the right moment? Pause for a second and let me know in the comments, because I genuinely want to know how other people would have handled it. I reached into my purse, pulled out my keyrings, placed it on the table. Ryan frowned. "What are those?" "The keys." To what? Grandma's house. Silence. Ashley laughed nervously. Very funny. I'm not joking. My mother stared at me. What are you talking about? I calmly explained that the investor had sold the property. I'd negotiated privately, completed the purchase legally, and had been the owner for several weeks. Nobody spoke. Finally, my uncle blurted out, "You bought it." "Yes. Why didn't you tell us?" I looked around the table. "Because none of you asked how I was doing after Grandma died. None of you cared when I begged for more time. You made it very clear that your decisions didn't need my opinion." Ryan's face turned red. "You had no right." I almost laughed. "No right, you sold the house despite Grandma begging for it to stay in the family. I simply bought it from the legal owner." Ashley suddenly asked if she could visit sometime. The audacity stunned me. My mother reached for my hand and said maybe this could bring everyone together again. That sentence hurt more than all the others. Because now that the house had value again, suddenly family mattered. I gently pulled my hand away. "No." The room froze. "I spent years showing up for Grandma while the rest of you made excuses. I begged you not to sell her home. You ignored me. Now that it's mine, you don't get to rewrite history." Ryan stood up shouting that I was selfish. I reminded him he'd called the house worthless only minutes earlier. He had no response. Over the following weeks, the phone calls started. First they asked politely. Then they demanded holiday gatherings there. Then they suggested I should let everyone stay whenever they wanted. Eventually my uncle even hinted that because it had once belonged to Grandma, everyone should share ownership again. I refused every single request. Instead, I restored the home exactly the way Grandma would have wanted. I recreated her flower beds, framed old family photographs, and turned her sewing room into a reading space. I hosted neighborhood charity bake sales in her memory because she always believed no one should leave hungry. Ironically, complete strangers respected the house far more than my own relatives ever had. Months later, the lawyer finally contacted me with unexpected news. While organizing old files, he'd located a copy of Grandma's missing handwritten letter. Apparently, she'd kept duplicates of several personal notes. He mailed it to me. I was terrified to open it. Inside, in her familiar handwriting, she wrote that she knew I had been the one who truly cared for her. She thanked me for every ride to the doctor, every cup of tea, every conversation, every lonely afternoon I had spent simply keeping her company. Then she wrote something that completely broke me. "I hope one day this house finds its way back to the person who loved it the most." I sat on the porch for hours holding that letter. Not because it changed anything legally, but because it confirmed what I'd always hoped. She had seen me. She had known. My family never apologized. Not sincerely. Some offered excuses. Others pretended nothing had happened. Eventually, most of them stopped calling because they realized I wasn't changing my mind. For the first time in my life, I stopped chasing their approval. I learned that sometimes protecting your peace means disappointing people who never protected yours. Now every Sunday morning I sit on Grandma's porch with a cup of coffee, listening to birds in the garden we planted together years ago. Sometimes I still expect to hear her voice reminding me not to overwater the roses. And in a way, she's still there. In every flower, every creaking floorboard, every warm memory those walls continue to hold. If there's one lesson this entire experience taught me, it's that love isn't measured by inheritance, money, or who gets the biggest share. It's measured by who shows up when nobody is watching, who stays when things become difficult, and who honors the people they love long after they're gone. The house was never really about bricks or wood. It was about keeping a promise to the woman who believed in me when nobody else did. If you think I made the right choice, make sure to like this video. If you enjoy emotional Reddit stories with dramatic twists like this one, subscribe for more because there are plenty more unbelievable stories coming your way. And most importantly, tell me in the comments, was I wrong for keeping the house to myself, or would you have done exactly the same thing? I'd genuinely love to hear your opinion. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you all in the next story.